Hi there, everyone. Let's try this again. This is a repeat of the movement presentation that was supposed to happen yesterday. That was on the 4th of October, but we had some technical challenges. So I'm hoping that you haven't written me off completely and that you'll have a listen to this presentation. So thank you, firstly, Cheryl, Warren, and the PPS team for keeping me around all these years. It's always a privilege to present on this stuff, which is really close to my heart. And by the way, my name is Steve Murray. I'm an exercise physiologist and a health coach, and I'm the co-founder of Health Architects South Africa. So I was thinking to myself the other day, and why it might look strange, why is the why so important when I'm supposed to be talking about exercise. I realized that I have been giving this presentation, not the exact one, at different audiences over the years, but pretty much since 1994. And even though, yes, the audience changed, and whether it was doctors or health club communities or whatever the case might be, the elevator pitch, if I catch someone on an escalator and I've got a few seconds to tell them what was the elevator pitch, it's been pretty constant. And that is the power of physical activity to fundamentally influence health in a positive way. So that's a long time to be doing that presentation. It also, one of the things I really do believe is that if I had to ask all of you, if I had to sit with all of you who eventually watch this one-on-one and ask you to tell me 5 things that you would need to do to be healthy, you would know that already. So not only have I been giving this talk for a long time, I don't think it's all that novel. And that's kind of where I'm really spending a lot of time at the moment, is trying to figure this out. So if I had to ask you 5 things to do to be healthy, and your answers were something like this, what do you need to do to attain, maintain good health or treat and reverse chronic disease? And you said something like this: exercise more, eat a bit less, eat more healthy food, don't smoke, drink less, and manage the stress in your life, you would be correct. And not only, so that begs the question, yes, like, why are you listening to me tell you stuff you already know? And why do my customers, and why do the end user in this case, or my customer, why would they want to pay me to disseminate information to their customers that their customers already know? And not only do we know the broad kind of things that we would need to do, we've even gone out and taken action. So this is the wild thing. So we know what to do, and we even know how to do it. So global health club spend 70 billion, 16 billion on health supplements, diet plans 14.6 billion, another 10 billion on workplace stress management programs. This is all in the year 2022. And the global weight management, weight loss market is valued at $192 billion. So there's a whole lot of human beings doing stuff along those lines of the 5 kind of things that you would need to do to be healthy. And what's that doing? That's the important question. What's the outcome? Well, whatever it is we're doing is not working. So this is just 20 years from 1990 to 2019. And this is really just a graph of what we call non-communicable disease, the disease burden. And it's measured in daily activity life years, or I can't remember what that is anymore. But the bottom line, it's not working. So what I really want to draw your attention to is kind of right at the top here, because not only is this bad news, because these are all the NCDs that are just literally growing. But the one on the top is interesting, liver disease. Now you'll think, why liver disease? Well, the top here, liver disease, mental disorders, respiratory disease, not so much, but neurological, certainly, cardiovascular disease, all of those except really for respiratory disease, are metabolic conditions. In other words, they are due to diet and lifestyle, diet and activity. And so we're spending all this money, we're doing all these things, but the bottom line is this graph is this is out of control. So whatever it is we're doing, not working. So all sort of, for me, crystallizes here. It's now 11:47 in the morning. By 12 o'clock tonight, near on 120,000 people will die from diseases they don't need to die from, number one. Number two, the diseases are 100% preventable, completely treatable, and in the vast majority of cases, completely reversible using lifestyle change alone. So 120,000 people didn't get the memo. And it's too late. And the same number will die tomorrow. So surely, at this point, we need to kind of say, well, let's go back to the drawing board here. What's happening here? And, I was taught, not that I don't think I really listened to it, and I think I'm not the only one who didn't listen to it. When you're looking to solve a problem, I think Einstein said this, if I was given 60 minutes to save the world, I'd spend 59 minutes making sure I've got the right problem and 1 minute executing. So we need to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, why is this happening? Why? What do we have to do, and how do we have to do it? Now, to be honest with you, we've ticked the how and the what box. We know what to do and how to do it. So maybe the answer lies, or the problem lies, in the why. And I'm absolutely convinced that it lies in the why. So first up, those of you that follow Stephen Covey's work, we've got to set the BHAG. The BHAG is the big, hairy, audacious goal. And in my world, the big, hairy, audacious goal is how not to die. How not to die from diseases you don't need to die from. If you do some simple things. That's the big, hairy, audacious goal. How not to die. So let's tick the box. Let's make sure we understand that the what's and the how, because I'm going to come back to the why. So what do we need to do not to die? From an exercise, from a physical activity perspective, we know this answer. We know it. And this is the answer. We need more than 150 minutes or less than 20 hours a week. So that's quite a big range of the amount of physical activity that you might need. But with not less than 150, but less than 20 hours, because at 20 hours you start to also get you don't necessarily get health benefits there. So that's too broad, but that's the reality. That's what we need. So let's narrow it down a little bit more. I love this. This is a quote from Matthew McConaughey, I think. I'd go and listen. There are people who want to go and see him talk. But basically, he says, look, find an activity you like. Break a sweat daily for 30 minutes or a minimum of 150 minutes a week. And you must include strengthening movements at least twice a week. So this is the World Health Organization's data. Fairly simple, and that's what we need to do. Ideally, break a sweat every day for 30 minutes, but make sure you get 150 minutes at least of moderate activity. We'll come back to that in a second, because you say, what is moderate? We know what moderate is, and we know how to measure it too. So that's what we need to do. And here's the thing that also kind of leaves me cold sometimes when I look at what's going on in the marketplace. Because when it comes to like how do we need to do what we need to do not to die? And on my side of the fence in physical activity, it's super simple. The only things that count are volume and intensity. So volume means how much, and intensity means how hard. So that's all that matters. There's other variables that we often look at, like intensity, frequency, and all of volume and all those kind of things. Actually not important. Mode of exercise. And I see this a lot, everyone's competing with each other for the best exercise or the best class, or this is the only way to lose weight, or this is the only way to gain strength, FX2000, whatever the case might be. The data just doesn't support that. Our bodies are simple things. And as long as we are getting our heart rates up, we are working at a point that we are in the moderate range, and we're doing some strength training during the week of some kind. That's all we need to do. So what a lot of people say, well, I don't have that kind of time. I don't have 150. I don't have 2 hours or 2.5 hours a week. And there's another, opportunity to get this done in a different way, and that's by changing the intensity of it. So if you're going to exercise moderately, you're kind of looking for between 150 minutes and 300 minutes of moderate. But you can kind of half that if you go into vigorous. So if you are somebody who likes vigorous activity, then you can get the same benefit from less time, but obviously at a higher intensity. So 150 to 300 minutes of moderate, 75 to 120 minutes of vigorous. So what does that mean at the end of the day? How do you measure that? Well, intensity is actually quite simple. Again, we've got technology to help us these days. So if you've got a fitness device or a watch, or anything that measures heart rate, intensity is typically measured by heart rate or heart rate response. So moderate activity is often we often calculate that, so it's between 60% and 75% of your maximum intensity. And you can calculate that in various ways. If you've got a watch, it'll do it for you. But if you don't have a watch, you don't even need that. You can do this with a really simple talk test. So moderate activity for me, and this is what I tell all our patients that we've got on programs, just take them moderate. A moderate intensity means that you could recite the alphabet from A through T without taking a breath. Okay? But then you would need to take a breath. Vigorous activity means that you can talk the lyrics to your favorite Beyonce song, but you can't sing it. So vigorous activity, if you've got a watch, means that you are from 75% upwards on your maximum heart rate. And those things are determined by age, but even those formulas are quite rough and ready. There are other ways that we use to calculate maximum heart rate with different formulas depending on your demographic, your age, your gender, your fitness level, etc. But it really doesn't matter that much as long as you getting into that range in some way or other, or you're using the talk test to determine your intensity. So why are you doing this? What's the outcome you are looking for? Apart from just feeling better, there's a whole bunch of things as to why it would be a good idea to exercise as often as possible. But the most important one is that our bodies are designed to adapt to a load, to a workload. So if you are exercising in those zones, what happens is you get fitter. Now, fitness is a very important concept, and it's very misunderstood in terms of what fitness actually does and why it's so important. But the bottom line is, if you're doing that kind of exercise load, 150 to 300 minutes, you're in your heart rate zones, what happens is your body gets better. And we measure that. We measure that improvement in METs. We can also measure it in VO2. But METs is a really simple one because it's a scale. It's got a number on it. And one MET is where you are right now. If you are sitting down at your desk or at home watching this presentation, you are expending 1 MET of energy. A MET is simply a metabolic equivalent of task, which is really just understanding how much energy is required to do a certain activity. Now, our bodies are looking for a fitness level of around about 10 METs. When I say looking for it, that's where all the magic starts. That's when all the systems are working the way that they should. So having a physical work capacity or fitness level of 10 METs or higher is really, really important because it provides an enormous amount of protection for you from chronic disease or from making sure the chronic disease you have doesn't kill you. So it's a super important number, and that's really what your exercise is trying to get you to. That's why you're doing it at the end of the day. That's the big, hairy, audacious goal from a fitness perspective, from an exercise perspective, is to get up to a fitness level of around about 10 minutes. Okay, so let me just show you what I mean by this METs thing. So quickly, to recap, METs is simply the ability of your heart, lungs, and blood vessels and muscle to utilize the oxygen that's in the air that we breathe and the oxygen taken out of the air in our lungs into our bloodstream, transported to working muscles, and utilized for day-to-day functions or activities. So if you have a fitness level of less than 5 METs, you're in trouble. And I mean that's a red flag for you, for your doctor, because your chances of developing a chronic illness go up by 60% plus. And the existing risk factors you have or chronic disease that you have will be much more likely to kill you. So at below 5, you're in trouble. If you are between 5 and 8 METs, you're getting some protection. Your body's like, okay, that's okay. We've got some of the systems working, but it's not optimal. And if you have existing risk factors, you're still going to be at risk. But get to 10 METs and the magic happens here. This is when our engine goes from a 1963 diesel pickup to a Formula One. And that's where the magic happens. So then all the systems are working correctly. The tires are at the right temperature. I like that Formula One car analogy because everything's working the way it should. So when you get to a fitness level of 10 METs and above, your chances of developing a chronic illness drop by more than 60%, as does your chance of serious injury, serious illness or death from one that you already have. And above 10, you certainly get greater benefit, but it does flatten out. It doesn't increase exponentially like it does from 1 to 10. So that's why it's important to be fit. It's why it's important to exercise regularly. That's the real outcome that we're doing this for. And then if you have an existing chronic illness, we know we can prescribe exercise these days. The research is that clear that we can prescribe exercise depending on chronic condition. But I don't want to spend time on that today. Because let's summarize quick. So where we are is that we know what to do and we know how to do it. But the question has got to be, why are we not dying? Because if the goal is how not to die, well, we're not doing so good. So why? Why? And let me kind of let me try and explain. This is really this is not my my hypotheses on my own. This has been the collective thinking from some really, really smart people around the world over the last sort of 10 years or so. And we've had input from anthropologists and sociologists and archaeologists, even a lot of people sort of sitting around the table trying to get their heads around this problem. Because the current narrative here is, and particularly from the medical profession, I'm absolutely, I put up my hand. I've been guilty of this myself, is to say, you're thinking to yourself, why don't you get this? What is it about this that you don't understand? I ask doctors often, I say, doctor, do you encourage your patient to exercise? And they, to a man or a woman, they're like, absolutely. Tell my patient exercise. And I say, how do you tell them? And a lot of them go, well, I tell them if they don't exercise, they're going to die. And then I also say, how's that working out for you? And the answer is pretty much the same. Well, who knows? They don't. So does it mean that everybody, that's more than 70% of the world's population, who are now either have risk factors, certainly in the developed world, in the first world, have one or more risk factors for chronic disease, or have an existing disease? Are they all just stupid? And a lot of my colleagues would say yes, but I don't agree, because the current narrative says we've got to attribute blame somewhere. We have to. Can't be us. Cannot be us. And we attribute blame in two places: gluttony and sloth. We've even got words for them. Okay, we've made them a sin. I was brought up Catholic. I know all about these. So it's very simple to say, well, if they're not doing that and they're not prepared to do that, it must be because of gluttony and sloth. So if anyone's heard this before, if you're struggling with weight, someone's saying you've got no willpower, just eat less. And then you've got this massive lie, one of the biggest lies in medicine: a calorie is a calorie. And it's not in the scope of today, but I mean, that is one of the biggest lies in medicine. So, and then from a sloth point of view, we say, that she's lazy, he's lazy. Just exercise more, man. Just like exercise more. You've got no courage, you've got no determination, you've got no backbone, blah, blah, blah. You're a sloth. Can't help you. And this narrative is incredibly important for particularly the medical profession, and for manufacturers, for example, of processed foods. All of these groups need this narrative, because this narrative, helps with a very, very important scientific acronym here. It's really, really important, called NMF. Now, NMF stands for not my fault. Not my fault. I'm telling you what you have to do. If you don't do it, not my fault. You are lazy. It's because of gluttony. It's because of sloth. That's it. So there are two parts of that conversation. The person saying, hey, not my fault. The person who's on the receiving end of that. That's also unbelievably difficult. And here's kind of the crux of this thing. What if everything about this narrative is wrong? What if every single part of that narrative is wrong? And I assure you, this is not our first rodeo here, particularly in healthcare. I was watching a documentary the other day, about cognitive dissonance, and bankers are particularly prone to cognitive dissonance, which is really just the ability to rationalize the irrational, or to fundamentally believe that your position is right despite all evidence to the contrary. And I promise you, bankers that's like grade school, compared to us in healthcare. Just a fun fact. It takes 17 years on average from when the science is generally accepted in healthcare to a change in clinical practice. 17 years. So if that's not cognitive dissonance, I don't know what is. So we've done some pearlers here. I'll give you 2 examples. Cholesterol causes heart disease. That was in the 80s. Very simple. Science was good. Person has a heart attack. Do an autopsy, cholesterol in the arteries, therefore cholesterol's to blame. Great, done. Pharmaceutical industry says, great, we've got a drug for it. And 20 years later, 40 years later, cardiovascular disease is almost a vertical line. It's still the biggest killer of human beings. At what point do we say, well, we made a drug for this, but it doesn't work? Why do we keep using it? So, and by the way, it gives you type 2 diabetes, but it's not my problem. Not my fault. Back there, I'm a cardiologist. If you get diabetes from the medication I gave you, go and see the endocrinologist. It's not my problem. So, I think everything about this narrative is incorrect. And the reason for that, and this is where, the chronic disease conversation has gone over the last 10 years. And those of you who may have heard me talk before will know my parable of the benevolent aunt. I'm a visual person. I think in pictures. So I'm referring here to our DNA. Our DNA. And when I ask people what does DNA do, the answer is pretty much the same. Excuse me. Determines the height of my height, or the color of my eyes, or the color of my skin, or features like my parents, etc. Which is correct, but that is only a minuscule part of the job of our DNA, because our DNA is essentially a code. Every single human child born has that code, which allows our system to navigate and control these 7 billion chemical reactions that happen in our body every second. That is not a typo or a stutter. There are 7 billion chemical reactions in the human body per second. That has to be controlled against some kind of code or spreadsheet with some assumptions attached to it. So I always say that my benevolent aunt is, I see this as a person. I see it as the severe, I don't see it as this kind of picture, severe woman with a big code book in one hand, big ledger, and a set of keys in the other hand. And the ledger is the collective experience of the last 1.9 million years, because human DNA has not changed for 1.9 million years. So it is the same. The code that my benevolent aunt expects to be able to use to control our systems are the same as it was 1.9 million years ago. So that's what that collective experience does. That's why DNA does what it does. That's why we act like a human, because we're human. It's not that we were taught that way. It was that the code built into every single cell is doing that. So let's just think about this for a second. So 1.9 million years ago, the code was the same. Now, 1.9 million years ago, and all the way up to probably 40,000 years ago, our Creator gave my benevolent aunt 2 tasks, and 2 tasks only. And that was, get this, I'm referring to myself, get this fool to tomorrow alive. That's a big step. 40,000 years ago, that wasn't guaranteed in any way. And number 2, when he does eventually shake this mortal coil, make sure that there's more of him than when he started. So there were 2 jobs that my benevolent aunt had to do. One was safety, and the other one was procreation. So those were the 2 jobs. And that's it. Now, if you think about getting to tomorrow alive, that where we are today is very different 40,000 years ago. So, and now I said this last year, I can't believe I'm actually presenting a slide here from a socialist, and not a Marxist, Leninist socialist, but a social scientist called Abraham Maslow, who Maslow's hierarchy of needs, some of you may have heard of it, was a theory which says if self-actualization is the human goal, why am I here, meaning of life sort of stuff, but to get there, we need to go through esteem, belonging, safety, and then physiological needs. So at the bottom is the physiological needs. And those are very simple: food, water, shelter, warmth, and sex. Those are the physiological drivers of human beings. That is hardwired into our DNA. So our DNA's code is to do that. Make sure that those are met, those needs are met, before we can start thinking about safety, belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. So guess what? That is every organism on the planet's drive, is to do those two things. And therefore, here's the thing. From an exercise point of view, there is absolutely zero evolutionary need to exercise, for example. And I'm going to explain why I say that in a second. So there's no need for us to exercise. Our DNA, there's no code that says, hey, we need to go and exercise. And here's interesting. But there will be, you will get told, your body will tell you if you're thirsty really fast. It will also tell you if you are hungry. It will also tell you if you are cold. But is it not interesting that it doesn't suddenly wake you up on the couch and say, you have to go and exercise? There's this need to go out and run. But eat, drink, and make sure that you're warm. Those things are 3 times a day that will happen food-wise. It will happen if you're thirsty really fast. And if you get cold, you'll know about it. So our DNA, I just want to say this. Our DNA is, our ideal state from an evolutionary perspective would be a fat endurance athlete. Just park that for a second. So, real quick. I find this really interesting, and this is important. So human health, and I'm not talking about longevity, they are different things, started to decline from the start of the agricultural revolution. And there's a school of thought that says there's been really 2 massive changes in humanity, where you're not just changing the rules of the game, you're changing the game. So from hunter-gatherer to agricultural revolution was a massive step for humanity. And from agricultural revolution to industrial revolution was another one. And now the third one will be the AI revolution. And I just want you to think about this for a second. From the time that we stopped being hunter-gatherers, our health started to decline. But our longevity started to improve. So we must separate those two. So height and health of people declined because we had suddenly less variety of food. We were less active, and we started to get diseases from domestic animals that we were now living with. In the Industrial Revolution, it got worse. Conditions were incredibly poor. We have diseases spreading everywhere. Nutrition declined even further, as did physical activity. So now I want to sort of overlay this principle here, which is the principle of effort versus availability, and why physical activity is actually the driver of pretty much everything that we do, and why it's so important. So if you just go back 1.9 million years, The food availability was 2, the effort to get it was 10. You know, you got a pointy stick if you're very lucky, but you know what, you're grabbing what you can eat. So, you know, carpe diem, grab what you can eat and grab what you can catch. About 400,000 years ago, it changed slightly. The availability was 3, the effort to get it was 8. Now you've got a pointy stick, you've got a spear, you can do that. You eat what you can when you can. But here's the thing, 45,000 to 10,000 years ago, this is our sweet spot from a health perspective. This is when human beings were the most healthy. Not the longest living or the most advanced, just the most healthy. So now your community grows the available sources of food, you start making more than you can eat, etc. So food availability 5, effort to get it 7. But we carried on. Okay. In fact, it should be the other way around. 1500 AD, you know, cupboard or pantry would there'd be a slight bit of food in there. You'll be lucky if it's not more than soup or bread. Eating meat as an annual occasion. Okay. And if you're lucky, you can make some dairy from a cow that you have. Go to 1959, not too long ago, only 13% of homes have refrigerators. Pantries are stocked weekly. You've got some canned ready-made meals, but most food is started from scratch. But availability is now 8. If to get it is now 2. Where we are now, I think you'll agree that availability is 10. Effort to get it is 0. You could all, right now, from where you are, get food within seconds, not minutes or hours or days. So we need to just think that if this was the sweet spot, what was happening there? Well, I can tell you now that our hunter-gatherer, early agricultural ancestors were doing 3 to 4 hours a day of foraging or moderate physical activity per day. Energy expenditure was basically 2 times BMR or basal metabolic rates. In other words, I was burning around about 4,800 kilocalories in those at that time, or 228 minutes. So that was the sweet spot. That's what we were doing. So can you see that there was no thought that human beings would stop moving. It was never contemplated. It's nowhere in the code. Never. Because every single physiological need that we have needs physical activity, needed physical activity in order to get it. But we don't need that anymore. So we've successfully met the needs of our DNA. We've won the game. We win. But in the process, we've broken the model. Because we've reached a tipping point. Our generation will be the first generation, since we started tracking this thing, that longevity will decrease. Health has been decreasing for a long time, but longevity will decrease. And our kids will even be worse. So we're on the way down now. So what is the enemy then? The enemy is not keto or paleo or this exercise program or that exercise program or the Atkins diet or... What is the real enemy? Who is the real enemy then? And, Tsang Tu said this, make sure you know the enemy. It's really important that you're fighting the right enemy. So we've said, right, gluttony and sloth are the enemy. It's your fault, not my fault. Yeah, processed food is to blame. But we've shown that not to be the case. Because despite the fact that as we started to accumulate more wealth, what did we actually buy with that wealth? So let's just kind of get to this point where I say, well, and I'm going to use the United States as an example because that's where it's most evident. So from post-World War II in the United States, the US accumulated more personal wealth per individual than any other country in history. But what did the boomers, the post-World War II people do with that wealth when they accumulated? What was the outcome that we were looking for as a species? from the biggest revolutions in history, agricultural revolution, industrial, and now AI. What did we do with the wealth as we accumulated? What we did was we bought convenience. That's what we bought with the wealth. Because that is what our DNA wants from us. So if I go back to what is the task of my benevolent aunt? Get Stephen to tomorrow alive. Okay? So that means you better, when you see food, you better eat it. If you come across a mulberry bush with your mates when you're out foraging 40,000 years ago, tell no one. Eat it all and then sleep under the tree. The objective of our DNA is to eat as much as possible and move as little as possible, because our DNA is prepared for scarcity. That is what it is assuming, that this is just a lucky day and not a lucky 70 years. So convenience is what we craved. And that is what we bought. And there's a price that will be paid for that convenience. So for me, it's super simple. The problem is not packaged food and the fact is that Zumba is better than this, or whatever the case might be, or electro, whatever, or rebounding, or the Atkins diet is the best, or paleo is the best, or keto is the best, or we're fighting the wrong enemy. The real problem is low movement syndrome. That's the problem. The problem is that we went out and bought convenience. So in order to get it back, we are going to have to remove convenience as much as we can. So let's review. We have to be active 150 minutes or less than 20 hours a week. This becomes then really critically important. Find something you like to do. That is vital. If you like going to the gym, go to the gym. If you hate going to the gym, but you go to the gym because it says so on your on the program you picked up in women's health or men's health, you can forget about it. 12 weeks is not going to keep you well. You have to find something that you can do for the rest of your life. So that's super important. Find something you like to do. Break a sweat every day and include some movements and stuff that you're going to do that is going to improve your strength. Because here's the thing. If you don't make time for exercise, you're going to make time for illness. And the 120,000 people that died today didn't get this memo. And they're dying from things they don't need to die from. But we have fundamentally missed the point. The point is, how free do you want to be? Freedom is not convenience. Be critical of everything that is convenient, both food and movement, and find ways to be less convenient. Find ways to challenge convenience wherever you can find it. I want to end off by saying there's a series on Netflix that I would suggest that everybody watch. It's called Blue Zones. And Blue Zones is essentially a journalist chronicling the areas around the world who managed to achieve the best longevity on the planet. And they all share the same things. So from a movement perspective, they share a common absolute culture of movement. In Japan, for example, on the island of Okinawa, the people don't have chairs. It's not part of the culture. You sit on the floor. So guess what? You're getting up and down every day, hundreds of times a day. They work in their gardens. In Italy, everyone walks, and it was absolutely fascinating. There was 2 villages. One village had a lot of elevation in it, so you did a lot of walking between your mate's house and church and so on. And the other village down at the bottom had no elevation. Longevity was 6 years on average better in the village with elevation, which meant people were walking. Physical activity is not a chore. It is not a standalone. Physical activity is a necessity. It's a necessity to remain healthy or to attain good health or to manage risk factors or to reverse a chronic condition. Convenience, ladies and gentlemen, is the enemy. Find it. If you want to be free, you don't want to be convenient. I'd love to hear from you all. I'd love to hear any comments or thoughts on it. Please let me know. I look forward to catching up with you all in the app. Have a great day. Apologies again for yesterday and the sound, and I hope that you got some value out of today's presentation. I'll chat to you all soon. Thanks. Bye now.